All right. Well, it is noon, so we will begin the webinar. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is PH. I'm with Sainies. Welcome to Financial Fridays with Sainies and Equitable. Today's topic is all about the New York State pension. Sainies is excited to offer these sessions in cooperation with our corporate partner, Equitable Advisors. And before we begin, we'll hear a few words from our sponsor.
Is we financial firm and been a strategic partner of Sainies for the last 10 years. In that, we've had a commitment to the K-12 marketplace, making sure that educators are educated about their finances. We've been able to give those members additional support that's needed to make some of the biggest decisions in their life, like preparing for their retirement and their kids' college education. When an Equitable advisor meets with a Sainies member, what our objective is to give them the confidence that they need going into retirement, making one of the biggest financial decisions they'll ever make in their life, to best assist them prepare with whatever their financial goals are. Equitable provides Sainies members includes financial resources and articles, complimentary financial profile meetings and an asset map, professional development educational webinars to units, and then in 2025 we're going to be doing a Ready to Retire series for people that are at least 1 to 3 years out from retirement and want to know how to finalize next steps. One of the benefits of being a Sainies member is on the first Friday of each month, we've always provided a Financial Friday series. It's a 30-minute series that goes from 12 to 12:30 that's presented by local regional representatives at Equitable that manage each region within Sainies on a variety of topics, including planning for the future, student loan forgiveness, and healthcare and retirement. What I would want Sainies members to know about the Equitable relationship is that you're going to have questions that come up, and there's always a tremendous amount of resources. There's an email address, sainiesmembers@equitable.com, that can be utilized, and there's always somebody on the other end of that email address to address any questions, comments, or concerns. Best time to plan for retirement is today. Looking at the future immediately or as soon as you're able to, realistically, you're going to be best prepared for that future. Sometimes if people haven't looked for the financial future yet, minimally 7 to 10 years out from retirement, that threshold absolutely must start because you still have time to make effective change, tweaks, and adjustments to your financial situation to best be prepared. The most important message for Sainies members to know is that Equitable Advisors is there to help them as life comes up. It is normal and it's going to happen where there's questions, concerns, things you're unsure about, and you've got a tremendous amount of resources to help and support you through that.
All right. And now joining us today from Equitable is Joe Scrow. Welcome, Joe. And I'll just say this little spiel before this session is being recorded, and we will save questions, any questions you have, until the end of the presentation. But feel free to ask any questions in the chat. We'll just get to them at the end. And our Q&A time, once again, is best used for general questions. But please know that the Equitable team is available at any time to answer your personal questions. You will find contact information for Joe and other regional reps at sainies.org. And now I will turn it over to you, Joe.
Awesome. Thanks, PH, and good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully everybody's having a great week. Last day before the weekend, very exciting. Hopefully the weather starts to warm up a little bit. I know everybody's all across New York here, so hopefully we get some nice weather. Today's topic is going to be all about the New York State pension, which, being in the education field and industry, it's definitely the most important aspect of somebody's retirement, is knowing what your pension looks like and how to really maximize all the different options that are available to you. So what I'm going to do, just give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen here. All right. Can you see my screen okay? That look good, yeah. PH? Okay, perfect. So again, really, we're going to walk through a breakdown of the New York State pension. How does it work? how is it calculated, some of the different options that are available out there for you. And then we'll go through some educational pieces as well there. As we know, the New York State pension, there is a tiering system associated with it. So based off of when somebody started, their years of service is going to determine what tier do they fall into. So those are all the current tiers that we typically see educators in today. Tier 3 is really going to be the earliest. Now, there was a tier 1 and tier 2, but tier 3 is there. Tier 4 is most common. Tier 5 was a very short window. As you can see, it was only from 2010 to 2012. And then some of our newer colleagues, tier 6 is anybody who started from 2012 into the present day. So number one, understanding your New York State pension is knowing, well, what tier do I fall into? Now, I understand that a lot of people, they do get those communications and the letters from the pension system. Should tell you right there on some of those statements, your estimation for your pension, but as well as what tier you fall into. Now, how is your pension benefit calculated? Again, this is going to be based off of what tier that you do fall in. Again, here are all the different tiers. So first, you got to decide what tier pertains to you. Second, your calculation is going to be based off of these 3 factors: the age at which you decide to retire. Number 2, what is your final average salary? And then number 3, the total years of service that you accumulated. Now, one thing to note too, before we move further, I know a lot of times people may start a job earlier in their careers. Maybe it wasn't education tied, but it was state pension tied. So we get a lot of people, maybe they were a lifeguard for their local park, or maybe they started a full-time job over the summer, working some sort of a public service type of position. Those years, if you were paying into the pension system, those do count. So it's always a best practice. Go back, think about your career, not just your educational system career, but even when you're working some of those part-time jobs, as those years of service could potentially be bought back to increase your overall total years of service work. So it's very important to note. It is a system that we do help a lot of our clients buying back those previous years to boost up their pension down the road there. So we'll take a look at a couple of tiers. Again, the main 2 popular ones are going to be tier 4 and tier 6. So tier 4, just to start off, you can see there at the top left, full retirement age is going to be age 55 with 30 years of service, or age 62 with at least 5 years of service. I'll come back to that as we look at some different examples. But to be vested for this pension system, for the first 10 years of service, you had to contribute 3% of your salary, income, paychecks, however you want to think of it, but 3% of your total income was contributed towards the retirement system. Now, that's not something that we can control. We had to do that for the first 10 years. And then, like we said, on the back end, when you do decide to retire, your pension benefit is going to be based off of how many years of service. So that SC, the service credits, and then the FAS just stands for your final average salary. So for tier 4, as you can see, right, and these are just quick little graphs, 10, 20, 30 years. You could obviously retire with 33 years of service or 24 years of service, right, anywhere in between. But every year that you work, that's 20 years or less, you get 1.66% of those years. So as you can see, 10 years of service would get you 16% of your final average salary. Once you hit 20 years in tier 4, those years of service bump up to 2 percentage points per year. So you can see 20, you get 40, 30, you get 60. Anything above 60%, so anything above 30 years of service, let's say you work 31 years, that additional 1 year is credited an additional 1.5%. Breakpoint at 20, like we just talked about. Your final average salary for tier 4 is going to be the highest 3 consecutive earning years that you do accumulate over the course of your tenure. Now, for most people, that's going to be the final 3 years. It's not always the case, though. You know, we actually just had a client who was in education went to administration, dropped out of administration, went back to the education in the classroom, right? So it definitely happens. But it's going to be the highest 3 consecutive years that you have earned. So for most people, it is going to be the final 3 years there. So here's a good example. So let's say somebody did work until that 30 years of service. So they would be entitled to 60% of their final average salary. And let's just say, easy numbers, their final average salary was around $100,000 of an average there. You would multiply those two numbers, so 100,000 times 60%, and your pension payout, the single life option, would be $60,000 per year, every year in retirement until the day that you pass away. One thing to note about any of these tiers is, again, that full retirement age on the top left there. So if this was somebody's example, let's say they hit that full retirement age, they were 55 with 30 years or 62 with 5 years, again, they would receive that full pension benefit. If they were to, let's say, retire past 55, but they didn't have the 30 years of service, there would be a reduction from that number. So just to give you some examples, age 61 without 30 years of service, there's only a 6% reduction there. 60, it drops to 12%. 59, it's 15% reduction. Again, you can retire the earliest at age 55, but if you don't have 30 years of service, there's going to be a 27% reduction from that overall pension number. So again, it's very important that as you're planning for your retirement, you're aiming for that full retirement age, but if we can't get there, we have backup plans, we have backup retirement accounts that we can help supplement that pension. We'll look at tier 6. Tier 5, again, was a very short window. If somebody is in tier 5 and they want to take a look at their specific situation, again, we're always available for one-on-one meetings to go through those specifics. Tier 6, it is a little bit different. So you can see right off the bat, the top left there, the full retirement age, it has nothing to do with the 30 years of service, very similar to tier 4, tier 5. Full retirement age is going to be based off of really their age. So that's going to be age 63 with at least 5 years of service. Very difficult for a fresh college graduate, because if they did want to work fresh out of college up until that full retirement age of 63, you can imagine that's going to be 40, 41 years of service built up inside this pension system. And trust me, I hear it every single day of my life. My wife, she's actually a 3rd grade teacher. She is in the tier 6 pension system. She asks me every day, Joe, can I retire yet? I say, no, honey, you have a very long way to go. So I definitely understand the pain there. Looking at the contribution side of the board, so contributions, again, that's going to be different. It's not 3% for just the 10 years. It's going to be 3 to 6% for the entire duration of somebody's inside this pension system. That 3 to 6% is based off of somebody's income. So I'll give you rough numbers. 45 grand to 55 grand, it's a 3.5% contribution. 75 grand to 100 grand, it's going to be 5.75. So somewhere in that range, it's based off of your income. The more money you do make, the higher the percentage you will have to contribute on a yearly basis. But it is capped at 6%, so it can never go above there. Again, the pension benefit is going to be calculated, again, based off these two factors. The way that it's calculated is going to be a little bit different again. So for the first 10 years, you still get the 1.66%. At 20 years, it's 35% of your final average salary. And then anything above that 20-year mark, it's just going to be an additional 2% per year. So again, looking at some of those breakpoints, 30 years of service would equate to 55% of somebody's final average salary. Final average salary, again, it's going to be the highest 3 consecutive earning years. That doesn't change. Most likely going to be the last 3 years, but not always the case there. So for this example, right, let's say somebody did work that 30 years. That would equate to 55%. Using the same numbers, 100 grand times 55, and $55,000 per year. Also with tier 6, before we move on, like how we talked about with tier 4, it's important to know what that full retirement age is. So very similar, you can retire earlier than age 63. However, in tier 6, those reduction numbers are going to be a lot higher compared to the reduction numbers for tier 4. So just to give you the worst case scenario, if somebody did want to retire at age 55 and collect their pension, so elect for that to keep going, 55, New York State's going to take a 52% reduction from this pension number down here of 55 grand. So they're going to cut your pension in half if you decide to retire at age 55. So again, it's very important to work with financial professionals like myself, like other colleagues here at Equitable in your local area, to make sure that you have a very strong financial retirement plan where if you did want to retire a little bit earlier than age 63 and you are in tier 6, again, you have supplemental retirement accounts and savings that can bridge that gap from 55 to 63. Now, a lot of people do understand as they get close to retirement what those calculations are. They might have done some quick numbers, might have done some quick math, and you can very easily determine what that looks like. Most of the time when we sit down with clients, a lot of people are unaware that when you do go to retire and you have your meeting with the state representative, there are about anywhere from 12 to 13 options that somebody can choose of how they can receive that pension throughout the duration of their retirement. So, like we spoke, and all the numbers that I just gave you from those examples, the single life option is going to be that full 60% or the 55% of your final average salary. So, going back to the original example, oh, it's right there on the left. Let's say Jane is 55. She had her 30 years of service, and her final average salary was $100,000. Quick, easy math, 60%, 100 grand. Her single life option is going to be $60,000 per year, every year in retirement. Now, the way that the single life option works is that's going to be the most amount of benefit. So you can see it's 100% of that benefit. But if Jane were to pass away before her spouse, no more pension checks come home. What somebody can do is they can elect to receive a reduced amount. So this is what's called joint allowance, where instead of getting the full $60,000 per year, you take a little bit of a reduction. And how much of a reduction you take is going to determine, well, how much money you will receive on a yearly basis. So if we take a look at that top line there, the joint allowance full, basically New York State is saying, we'll call it 8%, right? So you can take an 8% reduction from that $60,000 number. So instead of you, Jane, receiving 60 grand per year, we're only going to give you 55,000 per year. The benefit of that is if Jane was to pass away before her spouse would continue receiving that $55,000 per year. So you're taking a reduced amount up front for the benefit of your beneficiary, whoever you list, to continue receiving that pension check until the day that they pass away. So out of the joint allowances, the joint allowance full is definitely the most common if somebody were to go at reduced amount of just the joint allowance. As you can see there, you can take half, you can have a 75% payout, you can have a 25% payout, but most of the time if people want to leave behind a reduced option, they would take that full amount. Another option of how to receive this is they can take a 5-year or a 10-year certain period. So what this basically means is this is going to guarantee that New York State's going to pay this pension benefit for at least a 5-year or a 10-year duration. This is probably the least commonly picked one because it's only a pension payout for, again, a 5 or 10-year window. This is more common for maybe somebody who has a medical history. Maybe they have a very terminal illness and they're not really expecting to live that long. Well, they can take this benefit and at least guarantee payments for a 5 or a 10-year duration. Again, it's the least commonly picked, but it is also an option that's listed there. Lastly, there is another set of joint allowance options that somebody can take. And this bottom option here, all 4 of those is going to be one of the more popular options. So instead of a joint allowance option, somebody can elect to receive what's called a pop-up from that joint allowance. And what the pop-up says, if you take a look at the difference between just the regular joint allowance full and the pop-up joint allowance full, instead of taking a hit and only receiving 91.86%, you could take a little bit less of a reduction. So let's say 91.43%. So you're getting a little bit less on an annual basis. However, let's say Jane's spouse passes away before Jane, well, then she would pop up to that single life option. So again, let's hypothetically say Jane retires at 55, and for the first 5 years of her retirement, she's collecting this pop-up joint allowance full. Let's say something happens to her spouse. 5 years later, her spouse passes away. So now it's just Jane as her beneficiary is no longer living. Well, because there's nobody left to leave the pension behind, Jane would then pop up to her single life option and collect that for the duration of her life. So basically what New York State is saying is that if you take a little bit more of a reduction and your beneficiary does pass away before you do, we will allow you to then collect your single life option moving forward. So out of all these options, again, every situation is different, but I would say the two most commonly picked that we see with working with educators getting ready to retire is going to be the single life option or this pop-up joint allowance option. Going back to this really quick, one thing we always like to highlight too, and this is right on the New York State retirement system website, is if you think about this concept, right, you can take either your full entitled amount or you can take a reduced amount. So we'll call this, $5,000 less per year to then give a benefit to anybody that you want to list. So in this case, let's say Jane's spouse. That's a very similar concept to life insurance, right? Life insurance, you pay for something, you pay for life insurance. And then if you were to pass away, a benefit is then transferred to whoever you list as the beneficiary. So on their website, they're basically telling all the members is that, hey, this reduction, right? You're typically paying $5,000 a year, let's call it, for this ability to continue the pension payment. You're essentially buying life insurance through New York State. And right on the website, it says, if you do already have, let's say, private insurance on yourself, or there's a capability and ability to maybe get private life insurance, that could be a much better option compared to taking that reduced option. Now, does it work for everybody? Absolutely not. But it's definitely something to sit down with a financial professional to go over your specific numbers to make sure that you're making the best decision, not only for yourself, but for your beneficiary, your surviving family, everybody for the years to come. So that's a big part of what we do is taking a look at everybody's individual situations. And then based off of that, what's going to be the best option? Is it single life? Is it one of those pop-ups? Maybe it's looking at private life insurance, everything in between. And then also, we always like to touch on taxes. We get a lot of questions about how is the pension taxed. Now, the pension is not taxed at the state level. So it actually is very advantageous for somebody to have a New York State pension and retire in New York State because New York State does waive those state taxes. Now, it is subject to federal tax, so that will obviously always be into play there. But one of the things that we always hear as well, New York State's a very high tax state, very high tax place to live wherever you do live specifically. But you just got to be careful where if you do decide to retire and move to another state in the United States, they may not offer that ability for your pension to be tax-free. You may have to pay now state taxes on top of that. So if you are looking to relocate post-retirement, definitely do your research and seeing which state does still honor the tax-free of the pension income. But it will always have to pay federal tax. And when you elect your pension, that's when you can elect your withholdings based off of your tax bracket, based off of if you do have a spouse, what they're bringing in as well. So that is fully customizable as well. Now, again, one of the most important concepts, I know we only have a couple more minutes left. The pension is a fantastic benefit, right? I wish I had a pension myself. A lot of private employers do not offer pensions, but this is really a great representation of somebody's retirement once they do start collecting that pension. So you see here, this bottom line represents your New York State pension. There's a slight cost of living increase there. It's not a lot, but it is a slight increase there. Social Security as well. I know a lot of people have beliefs on Social Security. Is it going to be around? What is it going to look like? But let's just say in this example, we are collecting Social Security. Very similar to the pension, small cost of living adjustment, nothing too crazy. But there's something in our economy, which everybody has experienced over the past couple of years, inflation. Retirement expenses, cost of living, gas, groceries, everything continues to increase. So the one thing to just be mindful of, where if you have two streams of income that are relatively flat for the next 30 years, and as cost of living and inflation continues to increase, initially there's probably not going to be a very large gap, but deep into somebody's retirement years, right, inflation's never going to stop. It's always going to get more costly as life progresses. So that's why it's super important to start contributing to retirement accounts, whether it's a 403b through your school district, 457, Roth IRA, traditional IRA. Take advantage of spouses or partners' retirement accounts. If they have 401ks, getting the employer match. It's very important to make sure that you do have other buckets of retirement accounts opened and set aside. Last thing I'll highlight, one of the things that we do, this is our flagship software called Asset Map. This is how we can make the best recommendations for all of our clients that we work with. Holistic financial planning. Again, everybody's different. Everybody has different scenarios. So we go through this process. It's completely complimentary. We don't charge for our time. Give you an analysis of your current situation. And then we can run different projections and really show somebody how on pace are they to meet their goals. Or, for example, I know we're talking pension. What's going to be the difference cash flow wise by taking that single life option versus one of those reduced options? And we could run all different types of scenarios, not only on retirement, but loss of life, education funding, anything like that. Again, here's some other softwares that we do utilize. We can take a look at cash flows. We can take a look at, probabilities of success in a very good market, an average market, or even a below average market. I'm sure some of you have been seeing the news as of lately. The market has been a little bit down. So all great softwares, all great resources. But again, one of the ways that you're able to put yourself in a much better situation and have more clarity as you're coming up to retirement is having a game plan in place, working with a financial planner like us here at Equitable, making sure that you know exactly what's going to happen and what it's going to take for you to live the retirement lifestyle that you want. Okay, went through that pretty quick. I will stop sharing my screen and let me, I can pull up the chat here.
Yeah, we got some
So
questions in the
somebody
chat.
asked, yep, I
You and
gotcha. Yep, so somebody asked anything above the 30 years. So yes, you continue to receive percentages above that 30 years. It depends on what tier you're in. So I'm looking at my quick sheet right here. So for tier 4, any year above 30 years, you get an additional 1.5% on top of that. So 31 years, it would be 61.5 percentage points. Tier 6, anything above the 20 years, you get an additional 2 percentage points. So if you were, let's say 31 years in tier 6, it would be 57% of a final average salary. Somebody asked, is the only option for your beneficiary your spouse, or can you list your children or somebody else? That's a great question. So when it comes to the beneficiaries on the pension, those reduction amounts, so the one that was 100% to 91%, the greater, or I'm sorry, how do I can put this? The younger the beneficiary compared to you, the higher that reduction is going to be. So for example, if somebody wanted to list their kid, it's going to be based off of the beneficiary's date of birth. If there's a 30-year gap, let's say, between the actual pension receiver and then the beneficiary, the benefit reduction is going to be a lot greater. So maybe instead of 60,000, they may only receive 30,000. So you just got to be careful with that. There is a calculator that we do run everybody through to make sure that if you were going to list somebody who wasn't the same age as you, does it still make sense? Or does it make sense to take the single life and maybe, like we were talking about, have private life insurance on the side? So yes, you can list whoever you want. However, the younger they are compared to you, the more that reduction is going to be from your single life option. Somebody else asks, are you a fiduciary? Yes, we are fiduciaries. We have to act in the best interest for our clients. We have a very great compliance team where we have to prove to them before anything is established and set up, yes, this makes sense for somebody. So yes, we are fiduciaries. We have to act in the best interest for our clients. I think that's, oh, okay, there's more in the chat here. Some people do have questions about their specific scenario. Again, I can reshare my screen. And if you want, you can scan that QR code that's listed there. Reach out to me. I can definitely run some numbers for you. We could set up a time to just talk initially about your situation and answer some of those questions there. A couple people asked about the beneficiaries. So yes, you can technically list anybody that you want. However, the younger they are, the higher the question is going to be. Good question. So somebody asked about the 3 years, the highest 3 years. It is going to be the highest 3 consecutive years. So if you did have years sporadic, maybe earlier in your career versus the later, it's not the highest 3 total years. It's going to be the highest 3 consecutive years. So they look at the entire duration of somebody's career, what were the highest 3 years total dollar amount wise, and then they'll do an average based off of that. Okay. So again, if you do have additional questions about your current situation, always happy to walk you through that. Create those asset maps for you, create different retirement projections. Again, it's completely complimentary. We don't charge for our time. More so looking to give you the answers that you need, and then kind of go from there.